We're celebrating 25 years of the Pritchard Hill Cabernet Sauvignon. We decided to engage our winemaking and vineyard teams in a conversation about the 2022 vintage as they tasted it alongside two of our greatest vintages from past years, the 2012 and the 2016.
Well, 2012. What do we remember about 2012?
It's hard to remember much about the growing season because it was so perfect and there was not a lot of drama to the harvest.
I agree. I mean, there's usually some acute event, weather-wise or during the rush of harvest that makes a vintage stand out to you. But that year just, I don't know, things just went the way they should have, and rarely can we say that.
The 12 was the last vintage that we crushed only at the Pyramid. Yeah. And then we were building the Shea, the new winery, as we were crushing this. And we were like, yeah, next year by then we're going to be in there, and by 2013. It's a real process of blending the Pritchard Hill. And then especially on a year that, in 12, I think it was probably effortless. 16, I remember we had to work pretty hard, but 12, it was very effortless to make that wine. Whereas I think 22, we had to really dig deep and say, what are the real parameters of the Pritchard Hill? What can be in there? And if we make less of it, it's okay.
No, it's kind of that brilliantly dark, kind of fumey, nose. It's just got a lot of range.
22 has a lot of structure too. It's funny because I think of it as a soft vintage, kind of a lower tannin vintage, but just being the Pritchard Hill Cabernet, it's got a lot of structure. It's still very big in the mouth, really explosive flavors.
No, I think it really illustrates that knife edge, Phillip, that we always ride. It's like, we want to make this wine that you can take it home and drink it now, or you can elect to leave it for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right? That's the hardest part of our job, I think, is to make something that is elegance now and then has just longevity to it. They're not always synonymous.
Pretty hot year compared to the 2012. Also, 2022 had some really good heat.
We do remember 22.
Yeah.
For all that we don't remember
Stephanie.
of 12, we do remember 22.
There was an acute heat event that kind of marched that vintage for us.
Labor Day is unforgettable in 2022.
That's right.
When we had that heat wave, we realized, like a lot of people around the valley, just went ahead and picked because the sugars were high. Mm-hmm. But it was so early in the season that you could really taste in the grapes that they were high in sugar but not ripe.
Yeah.
And we've seen that before, and the main thing that we've learned is never panic. Just there's just tried and true. If you have water, which we didn't in 21, but we did in 22.
That year we did, yes.
Yeah, we able to irrigate and kind of revive the vines and give them the chance to start ripening the fruit again. And then what we saw was, wow, the grapes are starting to ripen again. And the sugar actually comes down. And so I was feeling sorry for the people that picked.
12 through 16, those were just a stretch of warm years, spring rain, but not a lot of it. And so that's what kind of again, this was a year where it was a bit unremarkable, where there wasn't some massive rain that we had to avoid or some big heat wave or some,
I remember after we had blended the 2016, and this is kind of similar, ties 16 and 22 together, but that spring, Phillip and I were quite surprised at how well 16 had kind of aged out. And later on, wine is released and everything. And Phillip and I, there was a day when we found out that we got 100 points on the 2016. And we just marched outside of the lab, gave each other a high five, and we just yelled hell yeah at the Shea.
And then went back to work.
And then went right back to work. But I think it's really interesting to have that 22 sitting with 200-point vintages, and I think they're all super dynamic. I think that 22 is sitting right next to the two, at parity, And you know, Phillip, what are your thoughts? Like,
Well, you know, it's funny with 2016, I think it tells a little bit of a story of Pritchard Hill, is it wasn't considered the great vintage for the rest of the valley. And very often we see Pritchard Hill kind of charting its own course.
You know, this property is just amazing in the different aspects, the different elevations throughout the hill.
We know what this hill can do. You know, it's like the vintage here can be different from the rest of the valley. And I think that, you know, 22 is a very good example of that. And I never thought I would be so in love with this wine, but I'm so convinced of the greatness of the 22 at this stage, because every time, you know, this the Signature, the Hideaway, the Pritchard Hill, they're all so good. They're all so, you know, they're so enjoyable when they're young. You know, there's not this feeling like you have to wait for this. Whereas, you know, I think the 12 and 16, they're kind of wound up wines and everything, a lot of horsepower and everything, and we had to watch them evolve, and they've evolved a lot in the glass. Whereas the 22 is just charming from the beginning, just right from the time we poured it, and it's still that way now.